Post-election, I wanted to talk to my friend and the creator of the thinkingispower.com website, Melanie Trecek-King. I know I had you on earlier this year. I've interviewed you on video, but I just needed to talk to somebody who is also, do I call you a de-escalator these days? I mean, are you trying to lower the temps out there?
I try really hard to communicate important concepts and basic critical thinking concepts. And it's really hard to get people to hear what you're saying when they're triggered. So I do try and avoid triggering.
Now, hang on, Melanie. I get hung up on the word trigger.
Yeah.
Maybe we can come back. What do you mean by trigger?
Yeah, when people are emotionally, I need another word besides trigger. When people
No, go ahead.
emotionally activated. So like when we're angry, when we're afraid, when we're these emotions activate the basal part of our brain that goes into it's called the 4 Fs: fight, flight, freeze, or mating. And when we're in those emotions, we're not able to think critically. I use what I call a critical thinking training wheels approach, which is start with easier issues to help people practice the skills so that hopefully they graduate to the more difficult ones. But if I just turn them off right away, then they're going to shut down and not hear what I'm saying.
Okay. Well, angry and afraid sums me up. I'm having trouble sleeping. Anybody else having trouble sleeping? Now, I've struggled with insomnia my whole life. A true story. This will be interesting for those who've been following my journey. But I told some of my dearest friends that I've been struggling. I wake up stressed. My mind is like a spinning hard drive. And so we were at dinner, and one of them handed across the table a gummy and said, "Take this." Now, I don't think this is legal, but I don't think anybody really cares, right? So she has
it's totally legal.
Is it? Where? Where is it legal?
Massachusetts. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Well, Oklahoma is behind every other part of the country in almost every other way. So we'll get there, but it'll probably be, 2035. But she's got a license and she's like, "I'll give you a gummy. Try it." And I was very hesitant because I've never done anything. I'm such a baby in this world. But finally I thought, okay, I've got to get some rest. And so I cut it in half and I took it. It was one of the most stressful, sleepless, fitful nights of my life. It was terrible. And I guess for some people, this is a thing. I don't know. Do you have any experience? I mean, I'm not mean to put you on the spot, but like when people say, "I tried this," does this make sense to you, Melanie?
Okay, first, I can't wait to meet Natalie because I'm going to ask her about this story. I need the behind the scenes.
Okay, she paid the price because as I was over there flipping, and I looked like I was being basted. I mean, I'm just over and over and over and over, and she kept waking up. And she was so patient, but I could see the irritation because she desperately needed her rest. But yes, you will meet, you will talk, you can share stories. So what do you do for sleep? Have you been worried? Like, has worry hit you? Concern, anxiety? Does any of that resonate with you?
Yeah. I mean, it's been an interesting process for me because 2016 was very difficult for me. That election I took really hard. And this one I'm not taking as hard. And I think it's partly because I didn't allow myself to hope. At least that's what I'm telling myself. But I'm not really sure about that. Since this election, I have felt more of an urge to try and not only understand people and why they voted the way that they did, and try to talk to, I hate using these words, but them, but also us. Like what is motivating us? What might we be able to do better? Because at the end of the day, all I can do is change my actions and hope that I'm using my actions in a positive way.
So I'm over here spinning like a drive shaft and you're sleeping the sleep of angels. Orwell. What the hell? By the way, confession, and I don't do this very often because I think it's a bad habit, but last night I was desperate. It's like 1 a.m. and I got up and I took some NyQuil, and then I crashed and dreamed I was playing tennis with Steven Spielberg. So I don't know what they put in NyQuil. I was on the tennis court. I was playing tennis with Steven Spielberg. Woke up this morning and had a what the hell moment. So anyway, I don't know. I'm
What I'm getting here is that you have an issue with substances. You don't handle them very well.
No, I literally, I've never been drunk in my whole life. And I'll tell you, I'm a little afraid of alcohol. And this is probably because of my upbringing, which was Puritan. If we'd had a beer in the fridge, Mom would have had an intervention. She would have flipped it. This is how bad it was. We were going on a fishing trip when I was maybe 15, 14, and we needed a cooler to put the sandwiches in and the pop. And so Dad went down to the convenience store and he bought a couple bags of ice. And the only cooler that they had, it was a styrofoam cooler, and it had Budweiser on the side. It was the only one they had. It was a Budweiser cooler. Mom refused to go on the trip unless that was covered up. And so Dad had to take strips of tape to cover up. So this is how Puritan my upbringing was. And I guess some of that just echoes into me. And now I worry because I'm a control freak. I don't want to lose control. And I think if I have more than 2 glasses of whatever, I might wake up naked at the zoo. And this scares me, Melanie. You know, it scares me.
Such a bad thing. That might be a fun experience.
Oh my God, this has gone south. Okay. I was going to ask you another question before we got further into beliefs, and I want to talk about some of Jonathan Haidt's work. And is it Haidt or Haidt? I always read it Haidt. Are you on Blue Sky yet? Have you migrated over there to that social media platform?
No, I'm not there. And it's mostly because I am wary of adding another social media platform. I'm kind of full at this point, and I adding something else just seems like more work to do. Facebook is my biggest site. I have nowhere near the followers that you do. Facebook is my biggest site, and it's a good place for me to post kind of content that I want to post. I want to send people to my website. I want to do longer form content. I want to post videos. I'm trying to figure out Instagram.
I'm on TikTok, but just barely. I post on there, but it's the Wild West, so I'm still kind of figuring that out. But the claim is, here's an example. I've got somebody who shows up in the comment section of my latest speech that I posted. It's called The Brick Wall Brain, Why Aren't Facts Changing Minds? And they are critical of the content, and they are not happy. And then they post and post and post and comment and comment and comment. And most of it just seems, it's not necessarily trolling, but they're sending, not receiving. And then it's debate me. You know, I'm calling you out. Are you a coward kind of thing? And I just got tired of them suffocating the comments, and I blocked them from the channel. So now the claim is I'm either a free speech enemy or I want to live in a bubble where everybody only agrees with me. Is that person right, Melanie? What would you say?
So people on one end of the spectrum are one end of the bell curve don't really need me. And people on the other end of the bell curve are probably not reachable, at least with my time, energy, and skill set. I am not saying I'm writing anyone off, but I am saying with the amount of time it takes me to reach them, I could be much more productive by trying to get to the normals. The free speech argument is an interesting one because that comes back to the legal argument. And by free speech, that's a government. Like if the government's not putting you in jail, it's not a free speech concern. I just don't want you polluting my page and my comments with bad faith arguments. And so the rules on my site that I try to enforce, I want to make a community where people feel free to learn, to ask good faith questions, and to engage in productive dialogue. And I want to model that for people. And the trolls that come in with those kinds of concerns, they are concerned. You know what I mean? They're not there for actually learning. They have their mind made up and they're just trying to take your time and energy. And so I don't think that that argument holds much weight. On Twitter, that's what I find a lot of these days is that people aren't there to actually engage in a way where they're trying to learn. To be fair, I have never found Twitter that for me. Like, I don't have anywhere near as number of followers as you do. I've used Twitter mostly to connect with people, and I'm going to miss that aspect of Twitter. But it's not ever really been a place where I feel like I've reached the masses with my kind of message. For me, that's really um, Facebook. And I might add for TikTok. My following is still pretty small on TikTok, but oh my God, I love TikTok. TikTok is the best. Like, there's the cat videos on there are epic. Like, they're truly spectacular. I'm trying to communicate good messages on TikTok and try to get people to learn. And I will freely admit that when I go to TikTok, I don't go to learn, I go to be entertained. And so that's the problem on something like TikTok. Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily watch my own content, but please do. If you're on TikTok, please follow me.
No, I'll put links. Natalie's got us hooked on something. I don't even know what platform it's on, but it's a woman who has two dogs, and she places them behind a desk with plates on them. And then she just puts various foods on the plate, and the dogs decide whether or not they're going to eat them.
I have seen that. It's so good.
It's 60 seconds of, or they turn their noses up and they wince their eyes until the next goodie comes along. I don't know. I can't stop watching. There's another one, Kiki the spider monkey. Still spider monkey rescue in a diaper, runs around somebody's house. Maybe we need that, right? Maybe we need to disconnect just a little bit. Let me ask you about this. I had somebody on that speech that I gave, and I think this is valid. I was talking about de-escalation. I used the line, I'm going to try in my life whenever possible. And I throw the asterisk, whenever possible. And it's not always, but whenever possible, I want to be like my dog. I want to bark less and wag more in the one-on-ones. I'm not talking about the macro. I'm not when I'm going hard at Marjorie Taylor Greene and all these people. And the response is, and I think it's valid, but the response is, I'm not going to play nice with the arsonists, right? The house is on fire. I'm not going to go in with a soft voice and pat him on the head. At this point, it's war, and it needs to be war. And I'm not convinced they're wrong. If they said this on your page, Melanie, I'm curious how you'd handle it.
Seth, you and I have similar backgrounds in that we both came from, we've both radically altered our worldviews. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah. I mean, I'd almost a 180.
Yeah, same here. And I think about the person that I used to be and the ways that I might try and reach her. And I know I'm not sure what would work, but I am really damn sure what wouldn't work. And that is calling her evil or stupid or mocking her. And so again, I'm at a point where I don't disagree. The house is on fire. But I don't think the answer to that is to demonize people. People have a lot of reasons. If we circle back to the election for a second, people have a lot of reasons for voting the way that they do. Some of them I probably would put into that corner, that far into the spectrum, the bell curve of just being truly awful people. But I don't think everyone is. And the way to reach them isn't by lumping them all together. And so the only thing that I know how to do is to control my actions and behaviors and try to model what I think is the most productive way forward. Because at the end of the day, I have to live with myself. I don't know if I can make any changes, but I have to live with myself. Those commenters who come on my site who are just throwing grenades and trying to When I engage with them and I realize that it's starting to make me look bad, then the person I'm engaging with is probably not going to change their mind. But everybody else who is watching, I might be able to reach. And when I represent myself that way, then I don't feel good about what I'm doing.
I am writing a speech, and I've almost thrown it in the trash a dozen times, Melanie, about a lot of the stuff that we get wrong in my own tribe, right? In a meeting of my people of shared values, whether it's atheists or whether it's liberal, humanists, seculars, whatever. We like to think that the problem is always them, and that, I have seen an intolerance of self-reflection, certainly an intolerance of criticism in my own tribe, as if somehow we're not human beings. And what I often will hear is, well, why in the world will we take a breath and even look at us when they are so much worse? It's like a cheat to try to self-improve. And we take all the shortcuts, and this is bringing me back to the Jonathan Haidt analogy of the elephant and the rider, but we see something that validates us, and we are almost just as quick to like and share without fact checking. There was this supposed Stephen King quote that said, Fox News did to our parents what our parents were afraid video games were going to do to us. And everybody then memed it. And there's a picture of Stephen King with the quotations, and there's his name at the bottom. Well, I did a 30-second search. He shared it, but it was originated by somebody else. Stephen King didn't actually originally say it. So I go and I say, actually, Stephen King didn't originate. He's not the source. And people say, well, it's still true. Like there's an immediate deflection. There was another Stephen King related one where they said Elon Musk had kicked him off of X because Stephen King had joked that Elon was the first lady in the wake of the election, and he's been banned, and people were indignant. They're like, Elon Musk was a free speech absolutist, and look at his hypocrisy. And they soapboxed. I took 30 seconds. Stephen King never said it. He was never banned. It was apparently somebody else, or it was all satire. We knee jerk, I think, as quickly as anybody else. But when I say this, and this is true in the atheist verse, whenever we make bad arguments or we do something that speaks to bias, or we just get in a hurry, people are intolerant. They don't want to talk about it. Can we talk about reflecting on our own tribes and why that's not a cheat? I need validation.
Oh gosh, I heard so much in there that I related to. I personally, have you seen there's a news clip supposedly from Trump in I think it's the late 90s, and it's from People magazine, where he says that if I were to run for president, I'd run as Republican.
Yeah.
Because they're the stupidest voters in the world or something.
Oh, that's been memed all over the place. People share it and say, aha, he knew decades ago. Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah, not true.
That's true.
Completely fake. I always use it when I present about fake news, because the point is, when we tend to fall for things that aren't true, primarily when they confirm our biases. Like, oh, yeah, that makes sense that he would say that. When it triggers our emotions, there's that word again. So it makes us laugh. It makes us feel, self-righteous, angry, afraid. And when we hear it repeated, so amongst left echo chambers, it goes around a lot. But it's not true. I tend to show it alongside there was a news story that popped up around the same time, and it was Pope Francis shocks the world and endorses Donald Trump. This was in 2016. And again, totally fake, but that went around right-leaning things. Because again, it seemed true. It confirmed biases, and it triggered emotions. We can all fall for things that aren't true because of these various, because of ourselves, our own vulnerabilities. They make us feel like, yeah, we're right about this. And look how stupid the other side is. People think misinformation is an other people problem. Other people are stupid, and other people will fall for misinformation. But I am really smart, and I wouldn't fall for that. So I'm a biologist. And the single most unifying theory in all of the life sciences is evolution. Evolution helps us understand the unity and diversity of life, why things are similar because they have a common ancestor, and why they're different because of different selection pressures and genetic drift and so on that led them to different evolutionary endpoints. Okay, all that's to say, my tribe generally accepts evolution, but it's not because they understand it. It's because their tribe accepts it. So when we look down on people who don't hold those same beliefs, it's not because we're really smart and because we have a understanding of science that, the stupid people don't. It's just because our tribe happens to believe those things. But there's absolutely zero chance that our tribe is right about everything. So tribal beliefs, though, I'm on a rant here now, Seth. You're going to have to stop me.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Because part of tribal beliefs is that it's an us and them. In order for there to be an us, there has to be a them. When we're coming to our beliefs, one of the shortcuts that we take is, what do the people around us believe? We know shockingly little about most of our beliefs. There's a great concept in psychology called the illusion of explanatory depth, which is, if you want to know how much you actually know, try to explain it. Like, okay, so how does evolution work? Define evolution for me. Start at basics. Okay, what are the mechanisms of evolution? How would those different mechanisms work in different populations? Address these various misconceptions. Most people who aren't scientists but are in that tribe would struggle with those questions, yet they're really pleased with themselves about their accepting the science. But we need to realize that we're prone to the same kinds of thinking errors that the other side is. We just happen to be in a different tribe that aligns with reality on this particular issue. But we could be wrong about other things. So having empathy for the other side starts with understanding ourselves and recognizing our own limitations, having the humility to realize we're not as smart as we think we are, and we're probably not right about everything. And the other side isn't necessarily stupid. They just maybe have a different worldview and see the world differently than you do. I'm going to try and stop. Please interrupt.
I'm reminded of, this is a popular acronym, atheist. A, thoughtful, honest, ethical, intelligent, skeptical thinker. It's popular. It's been flying around for decades. It's not true. Like, I'm an atheist. This means I do not believe in gods, any god, anywhere. Doesn't determine anything else about me. Doesn't mean I'm intelligent. Doesn't mean I'm skeptic. Doesn't even mean I'm smart or intelligent. Doesn't talk about my capacity for understanding. It doesn't tell you whether I'm a good person or not. And yet we sort of lead with this. It's as frustrating as religion is a mental illness. I tell you, and this is why I've been thinking about doing this presentation next year, is because I'm like, just stop. Every time even for the most noble of reasons, even if we want to help in this world, every time we lead with an argument that is a bad argument, we are shoveling the ground beneath our own feet, and we're making it easier for others. Then they're not just misrepresenting us. They can actually use the words that we say. We're destroying our own position. It's so frustrating. And we as atheists, and I'm a frontline atheist, I'd like to think I have the equity to talk about this. We are not immune from saying dumb shit, right? Should I say dumb shit? We are not immune from having misguided ideas based on identity beliefs and biases. Okay, fine. There you go, Melanie. Take that and run with it.
So with as much as I'd like to take the higher ground, I don't think it applies to cursing. I am perfectly capable of cussing like a drunk sailor.
It's funny. My Puritan mother used to cuss once every 6 months, and her face would always twist up like one of those trees in The Wizard of Oz. Like it's what she really wanted to say. She'd be like, shh. she'd get so frustrated. And then we would just feel victorious. Like, yes, we got her to crack. And then she would apologize and pray and all those things. But I thought, let it out, right? Let it out. Sometimes you need to say the word. Go ahead, Melanie.
There was a study somewhere along the way. I don't care who did it. I don't care if it's been replicated, but it basically said that people who cuss are smarter, and I am going to go with it.
Go with that. Yeah, go with that.
So if we circle back to the Haidt's rider and the elephant, I think this is so helpful in understanding ourselves. Jonathan Haidt is a psychologist and has produced a lot of interesting work around why we believe what we believe. And he has an analogy called the elephant and the rider that I think is a great way to help us understand our thinking. It's a dual processing theory, which is, there are various ones, like Daniel Kahneman famously had a system 1, system 2. For my students, I find that systems are less easy to relate to than elephants and riders. So the elephant and the rider is, imagine in your head you have an elephant and then you have a rider on top of the elephant. So the rider, I'm even pointing to the parts of the brain that they might correspond to. So the rider up here in the prefrontal cortex, it's the part of the brain that you think of as you. It's the part that can think critically and analytically and can evaluate evidence and come to a logical conclusion and make sound arguments and so on. But it sits on top of an elephant, and back here I'm at the amygdala. The elephant is the part of the brain that is emotional and biased and tribal. It's motivated by its desires. It uses what it already knows, and it jumps to a conclusion to save energy, right? It takes a lot of work to think through things. So a lot of the times what happens is our brain is filtering information. It comes in here, and then the elephant goes, yeah, so this is true. And the writer, instead of reflecting and going, well, is this true? Let's think about it. Let's evaluate the evidence. How logical is this argument? It goes, yeah, you know what? That sounds right. Let's go with it. And then if asked, the writer goes, well, here are all the reasons why the elephant is right. So the elephant and the rider helps us understand that the vast majority of the time, most of our thinking is below the level of consciousness. It is automatic, and it is not based on an objective evaluation of evidence. So it jumps to a conclusion, and the writer acts more like our elephant's lawyer or its PR department. So it works to find justifications for what the elephant wants to believe. So, Seth, I think that my writer is talking to your writer. But actually, my writer is motivated by my elephant, and so is yours. So if I want to understand my own thinking, I need to realize what my motivations are. Is this a tribal belief? Are my biases leading me here? Is this something I really want or don't want to believe? Basically, am I using my writer to find justifications, or am I actually thinking through this? Now, the problem is this takes a lot of energy and time, so we don't do this most of the time. We have to turn this on. But I need to understand this about myself. And if I'm trying to have a productive conversation with you, I need to realize that your elephant is also leading your writer. So I think that if I'm giving your writer facts and good arguments, that it should convince you. But it's possible that your reasoning is not objective. There's something motivating it. So having a more productive conversation means having an elephant conversation. What are my motivations and biases and desires? And so the same thing for you. What kinds of things can we agree on? There's probably more than we think. And then working together to try and understand reality better. Our writers aren't necessarily going to war here. Productive conversations means understanding the motivations behind our thinking and trying to work together to come to a better conclusion than we would have been able to individually.
Is that the difference between going out to find out if you're right or going out to be proven right?
Yeah, there's a lot in there.
Okay.
Once our writer has decided that it's right, it tends to find more evidence that it's right. The problem is if we want to find evidence that we're right, we're always going to be able to do it. Especially these days, like you go online, you can find anything to support what you want to believe. A better way of trying to figure out if your belief is true isn't try to find evidence to support it. Is to try to prove it wrong. Don't try to confirm it, try to disconfirm it. If it's true, it will withstand the scrutiny.
Yeah, but that gets us into what source do I use to find legitimate criticism? If I'm reading an article about evolution and I type it into a Google search engine and I end up at Evolution News, which looks legitimate, they're actually an apologetics website debunking evolution. So now I've got a sourcing problem. Who's credible, who's not, who's an expert, who's not? And does that get me into the argument from authority? There's another broad question, but that's just what we're doing today. How would you address it?
No, I love this. Because so when I teach critical thinking, and so I teach a class that I designed to teach critical thinking, information literacy, and science literacy. And importantly, it is in that order. Because if we first don't understand our own motivations, for example, previous me did not want to accept evolution. It was part of my tribal identity. It was part of, if I accepted evolution, that means that God wasn't real. It would mean that my special place in the universe isn't real. It would mean that my entire worldview would start to crumble. Like if I went along that path, which means that if I want to understand if evolution is true, I need to understand my own thinking. What do I want to believe or not want to believe? And then I need to be able to subject those beliefs to actual scrutiny. Critical thinking means that we have to be honest with ourselves. Because if we're not, and I go to information, I go to Google and I use Google I can use Google as a search tool to confirm any belief that I want. If I don't first understand myself, I'm going to use information and search engines as a tool to confirm what I already believe or what I want to believe. So, understanding information and using information in a productive and objective way means understanding myself first. And if I do that, and then understand the various ways that some ways of knowing are more reliable than others, for example, the process of science versus individual experiences, then I can use information to find sources that are using that process of science to objectively evaluate those claims. And what is the best available evidence at any given time? Let me just bookend this by explaining one of my pet peeves, which is people who call themselves independent thinkers. But what they really mean is they often come to my site and they'll say something like, so you're saying I should just trust what experts have to say, and I'm an independent thinker, so I'm going to be able to evaluate this information all by myself. An independent thinker, a real independent thinker, understands themselves. They know, they are aware of what they want to believe and what they don't want to believe. They're aware of the ways that their perceptions can fool themselves. They're aware of how their biases can lead them astray. And they're actually in a good faith attempt trying to find the truth. So they are also aware of how various systems of understanding the world, like science, is a process of collectively evaluating information and evidence so that we reach a better conclusion than we would have been able to on our own. The point is, people tend to use this idea of an independent thinker to discount what the best available evidence has shown us to be true. Because what they really want to do is use their biases to lead them to a conclusion and then find reasons to justify them having that conclusion. That is actually the exact opposite of an independent thinker. You may want to undo everything that I just said and not show it. So it's totally up to you. But it was my rant. I just had to put it
Well,
out there.
I've heard flat earthers say it's my skepticism that brought me to flat earth. It's my distrust of, authority, taking the party line, listening to the authority with the capital A. I mean, you can do that with anything, denying the moon landing or 9/11 truth or anti-vax. I'm just uber skeptical. Look at me. I want to come all the way back around to a word we used near the beginning, because I want your take on it. And again, I'm going to attempt nuance, and I'm just going to prepare myself, my inbox for what's coming. But we use the word trigger. I wrote about this in one of my books. I can't remember which one. But I was talking about how we have always had content warnings when we get into really sensitive stuff. I mean, if you're going to watch a movie, it will say this film contains violence and nudity and language, and I think even smoking. They say, oh, warning, someone smokes in this film, which may be a bit much, I think. But we content warnings all the time. Hey, heads up, this is kind of heavy. And I think that's great. Prepare your audience. I'll do it when I'm giving a speech, if I'm showing a medical photo and I'm like, now this is kind of intense, but check this out. And that gives them a second to prepare themselves in their brain and kind of blink if they don't want to look. But I worry that in the era of trigger warnings, we are now trying to make sure that no one else around us feels uncomfortable, when discomfort might be my intention. Like, I want you to feel uncomfortable, or you need to feel this particular emotion, or it's not my job to bubble wrap the world, because then it becomes maladaptive. If you aren't developing the skill set, the tools, etc., to engage in a world that is unfair and may not care we exist and all those things, then you are not really adapting to life. And then people come back and say, how dare you, marginalized groups and people who are here seriously affected, whether they're neurodivergent, etc., they need us to give trigger warnings. It's a mess, and it's nuanced. I don't know, maybe this is an example of that line I gave in the speech, more than one thing can be true at the same time. Melanie Trecek-King. I just like saying your name all together so people will Google it. What do you say when I say the term trigger warning?
Yeah. So trigger warnings don't appear to have the impact that we hoped that they would. I would love to, if you allow me to, I will post some more recent research on trigger warnings. But trigger warnings are based on the assumption that if we warn people about potentially emotionally upsetting material, they can opt out of it, or they are more emotionally prepared and are better able to handle the material. The evidence is showing that trigger warnings themselves don't necessarily work. So I'm glad you brought up this word trigger again, because it can mean different things in different contexts. I was using the word to refer to when people are emotionally inflamed in some way, when their amygdala is activated, they're less able to use their prefrontal cortex to think critically. And that is pretty well established. The idea of trigger warnings, which is letting people know in advance that there's potentially emotionally upsetting content, doesn't seem to have the intended impact that we hoped, that researchers had hoped. So the idea here is that if we let people know in advance that like, for example, if we're going to read a passage in which there's a rape scene, letting people know in advance that this is what's happening and preparing them by giving a trigger warning, a specific trigger warning about this particular passage, might help them. Either they could choose to opt out, or they can be prepared so that it doesn't impact them as much. The research is not bearing that out, actually. Our attempts at preparing people emotionally in advance to protect them from the impacts of those emotions doesn't seem to work. All this is to say, I don't think trigger warnings and resilience are necessarily compatible. letting people know in advance that they might be emotionally harmed versus letting them experience the shit that humans put up with in a way that helps them persevere is truly spectacular to
It's
watch.
interesting. You and I both are dancing around this one because we don't want to be dismissive to those who have been generally impacted by trauma in their lives. But I think maybe it was Jonathan Haidt who had written about how we worry about creating a generation of tissue skinned people unprepared for the hardships of life. You know, we're so busy saying, I was at a convention years ago. And I remember there was a person who was having a conversation with a stranger and they were starting a story about their lives, their deconversion. And they kept saying, now, if stop me if this is going to trigger you. Is this triggering to you? I don't want to trigger you. It was very self-conscious. And I thought the flow of what they were saying and the ability of the interlocutor to properly take that journey was derailed because they had taken upon themselves whether or not someone else would be traumatized. But if I express concern about that, then, oh, look, Seth's a cis white privileged male who hasn't been through abuse X or abuse Y. Look at him dismissing all the people who need the trigger warning. I mean, it's a minefield.
My husband is African American. He's a descendant of slaves on both sides of his family. And they have taught me so much over the years. To watch my husband then, because he's an educator and a truly wonderful one, and so he's a musician and often uses music to help people understand different cultures and the kinds of things that to have empathy for what people were going through when they composed various things. You can see his various instruments and such behind me. He's a scholar actually of African American music, specifically slave songs and their derivatives. To hear the kinds of conversations that he has with students these days and how frustrated he is, students almost seem to demand a safe space to the point where they're unwilling, literally unwilling, to sing spirituals because of how they are triggered emotionally. Whereas to him, if you silence that music, you're silencing the people that wrote it. They were resilient. We're not helping students by protecting them from the harms of the world. The world is a rough place. And if you want to survive in it, if you want to thrive in it, then you need to understand how to reconcile those emotions and be resilient.
Send your email to trigger warnings may not actually help at Melanie Trecek-King at thinkingispower.com.
I'm so glad that's a fake email address.
I struggle. Empathy is the whole theme we've been having. And the quote miners could immediately say they don't care about the traumatized. They don't care about the neurodivergent. They are dismissing those who may need a little bit of a preamble. And I'll continue to say, heads up, this is kind of heavy, but I don't make it a big deal. I just feel like in my own life, it's not my job to keep you comfortable. I don't know. Does that sound shitty? Does that sound dismissive, Melanie?
No, the real world is shitty sometimes, and protecting people from it does not actually help them.
Okay. All right. See, and over it. Go ahead.
I'm trying not to get on one of my again.
See, this is what happened. I didn't prep her, and I barely prepped myself. I just hit start, and this is the stuff that goes down. All right. No, go ahead. We've got another few minutes. Hit me. What's on your mind?
I think that self-righteousness is one of the most unproductive emotions. I do understand it because I was in it as well. But if you're in a place where you think that other people must be stupid or must be evil to vote the way that they did, let me just ask you to reflect on, please empathize with people. Is what you're asking, is this helping? Is it productive? It sucks sometimes to have to be the bigger person. I fully will admit that. But I don't think that dwelling on those emotions, that I'm better than somebody else because of my beliefs or my worldview. I mean, I got to where I am by getting through a place where I'm not necessarily so proud of. But will future me look on current me in the same way? Like, what am I currently wrong about that future me will be like, oh my God, can you believe she believed that? Intellectual humility is not just a virtue, it is the only way that we can learn. If we don't realize that we could be wrong and that other people have something to add to the conversation, that I don't know any other way forward.
I was going to finish there, but I have to. It's not even a devil's advocate question. I think it may be legitimate. And you brought up slavery. The slave owner is supposed to look at the slaver and say, well, they've had life experiences. They've been indoctrinated with hate and oppression and bigotry, and therefore I am seeing them in 3 dimensions. This empathy then allows me to better address my own situation and the oppression. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it could be argued that no, the slave needs to defeat the enslaver because of the harm that's being done.
So, my husband is a scholar of African American music. He is now an assistant conductor for an organization called the Handel and Haydn Society, which is the nation's oldest performing arts organization. They actually performed for Lincoln's funeral, and they were old at the time. They performed for the Emancipation Proclamation. I'm in Massachusetts. They were very involved in the abolitionist movement and the women's suffrage movement. A few years ago, when a lot of organizations were having a reckoning with their pasts, this organization wondered about Handel's connection with the slave trade. So Handel was in England, and he was being paid by a duke that was involved in the slave trade. So he would write music for the court and then be paid in stock, and then would go to the bank and turn in the stock for money. And so when the organization was having this comeuppance with their past, they wondered what to do. And Anthony suggested, well, why don't we have a concert? And so his concert idea was to explore Handel's connection with the slave trade. Now, his concert, it's in its 2nd year now, and I am so proud of it. What he's done is he's created a dual narrative where on one side there is Handel in England, in the court where his wonderful anthems are being played, and on the other side are the slave songs, the spirituals that were being done by Africans, Blacks in the New World that were slaves. And so this dual narrative, he actually went through a process of finding spirituals that hadn't really been performed very often and arranging them in a way that you might have heard on plantation at the time. So the concert follows this dual narrative. There's a narrator that explains what's happening. It's called Crossing the Deep, where on one side you have the anthems, the Handel's anthems, and on the other side you get the spirituals. And in the process, you kind of feel yourself being connected to the slaves in the New World. because we know that slavery is wrong, and we understand that people were benefiting. Handel was benefiting from trade in people, owning people. But the whole point of the concert, you get to the end, and the whole point of the concert is to realize that we're all Handel. Like, we look at people in the past and even people across today, and we look at their morality and we judge them based on our standards. Slavery is clearly wrong, but people at the time justified it to themselves. What are we doing today? We're Handel in some way. What are we doing that future generations will look back on us with their moral standards and say, can you believe they did these things? His perspective, like, he is a descendant of slaves on both sides of his family. His ability to look at this issue and have empathy for Handel and to recognize that we're all doing something that future us's will judge in those ways is truly humbling. So I think the point here is for us to be humble and not be so convinced that our morals are the end all and be all, that we are absolutely right. And to stop judging other people and trying to cancel them for these ideas and realize that we all have room to grow. We can all learn, and we're right in some ways and wrong in others, but that's part of the process.
I get into the morality of the Old Testament authors and, the genocide and the slavery and whatnot. And I'm like, well, morality is morality. Like, if it was wrong now, it's wrong then. It should have been basic, So, I can see the other side of that coin, right? I'm not going to let the Old Testament authors skate on executing disobedient children or, going into a non-Israelite town and wiping everybody out, including the animals, because it was the morality of the time. That's tough. That's tough for me. I need to pray. You know what? I need a gummy.
Did you say I need to pray?
I was going to say I need to pray and fast and seek the Lord on that. But I understand, I think, the broader umbrella point is that we can be myopic, and maybe understanding how to dismantle all of the bad stuff requires perspective. Would that be a fair way to phrase it?
Yeah. And if I might add one other thing to this.
All right, go.
So we travel a lot. The first time Anthony was asked how much he paid for me was at a border crossing between Uganda and Rwanda. And the border guard wanted to know.
Wait, hang on, hold on. They asked your husband how much he paid for you?
Yes. Oh. That was the first time, and it was a border guard.
Whoa.
And his response was, well, she was free. And that was the wrong response because that meant I didn't have any value. And so, but we were allowed to enter Rwanda, so that was great. But then after that, yeah, it was, I think his final response that he landed on was that she's priceless. Oh. I know, but I've told this story many times, and most people laugh because, it is ridiculous. But they'll generally then say something like, oh, well, that's culture or that's religion. And I'll say, well, can you imagine a scenario in which somebody asked me how much I paid for him, and how would you respond to that? And that generally makes the point. Like, we all have morality blind spots, and the kinds of things that we accept aren't necessarily because of we're morally virtuous, but because of our culture and our time.
All right. You doing okay in advance of 2025? I know you're sleeping. I said gummy earlier. That's probably not the right thing to take when I'm feeling all stressed and anxious. I'll burst into flame. Local activist spontaneously combusts after consuming gummy. Details at 10. I don't want that to happen. But looking into the new year,
Yeah, I feel like I need to
disinformation.
bring you different gummies.
Yeah, maybe I don't speak gummy. I don't understand how they all work. So I'm gonna go fight. Right now, the best thing I've got is just to put a dog on my chest and let Linus sleep near my neck, and that seems to be the most relaxing thing. Looking
Yes.
ahead, though, just in a nutshell, disinformation everywhere. We've got deep fakes. We've got AI. We've got you can't trust your eyes and ears. What in the world? Do you have some way to sort of I don't know, BS proof ourselves? I need resources. I always like to lead with or leave us with resources. Do you have anything?
Um, well, I'm writing a book on this very issue. It's called tentatively "How to Be a Charlatan," and it's about how to understand the techniques that different charlatans are using. It will not be out in 2025, so in the interim, I would say
Go ahead, pitch your own site. Go ahead,
no,
pitch your own site. Do it.
I don't even know, like, the best advice I could give, please visit my site. Follow me on Facebook. I would love to have happy followers who aren't trolls, so please do that.
Okay.
In the meantime, like, if I could just, remember your own humanity and remember that you might not know everything that you think that you know, so have the humility and the skepticism and curiosity to understand yourself and to relate to other people. I'm doing my best online, as Seth, I know you are, but I think a lot of this is going to come down to personal conversations with people that you actually know in real life. And so it's a heavy lift. I totally understand to ask people to fight these battles personally, but I don't know any other way. I'm curious what
Yeah.
you think.
I'm trying to get over that hump myself. I've found myself not returning phone calls lately because I'm seething, and I do find myself distant. But I also, this is a gut head or heart head conflict. I also know that we're not going to defeat the bad by memeing. We're going to have to engage at the grassroots ground level, I think, with the people that we encounter every single day, humanizing the issues, maybe expanding their perception about what all of it means and what the implications are. And I stand by that. And that was the message of the speech. And it's the reason that following that post, I wanted to talk to you. And the time has flown. Melanie Trecek-King, thinkingispower.com. I guess we'll do this again in 2025. You hang in there, okay?
Seth, that speech was wonderful.
Oh,
Thank
thank you.
you. I really
Thank you.
appreciated it.
See, let me get you my American Express card number. I'll donate to the site for that. You're
Just
very,
text
very
it.
kind. Okay. All right. Wonderful.